Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Carl Walsh. Carl is a speaker, consultant, and business coach who blends theatrical expertise with corporate leadership. With 20 years as an award-winning actor and director, 25 years in corporate management, including as an IT director, and 15 years as a professional speaker, he brings dynamic storytelling and strategic insight to business growth. As the co-host of the Oval Table podcast and co-founder of Alpha Dog Small Business Coaching, Carl helps small businesses foster creativity, improve communication, and apply lessons from the theater to leadership and innovation. A certified red team thinking coach, he challenges teams to think critically and adapt in a rapidly changing world. Carl, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's an absolute pleasure having you on the program today.
Well, it's a real pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Well, you're welcome. And we have to give a shout out to Anastasia Lipsky.
She's a miracle. Anastasia's wonderful.
Yes, she is. Us
Right.
thought she'd be a great fit for the podcast, and we had a great introductory call. And, we find ourselves right in this moment recording what I know is going to be an impactful episode. But I love the way Anastasia vets her clients, and she vets podcasts. So she makes sure that the guest and the podcast host are going to be a good synergistic match. She does that very well.
Yes, she does.
So, Carl, one of my first questions for you today is tell our audience about the experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
Sure. Yeah. The first really important thing that happened in my life when I was 7 years old, Lawrence of Arabia came out. And for some reason, I really wanted to see it. And my mother said, "What, really?" I said, "Yes." I had seen a commercial for it, a clip. I really wanted to see it. So she dropped me off at the theater. It was in Beverly Hills. We didn't live in Beverly Hills, but that's where it was showing. And it was one of those great movie palaces of the early 1960s. I walked in, got my popcorn, got my Coke, and went down. I sat down. It was a matinee, so there weren't that many people there. And that was back in the days when a movie had an overture.
Yes.
The big movies did. And it went into the overture and the lights came down, and there's anyone who saw the movie then, if you remember, there was a big cacophony of drums and horns, and the lights came down, and then it went into the Lawrence of Arabia theme. And from that moment on, I was absolutely transfixed. About 2 hours later, the lights came up for the intermission. And yes, movies had intermissions back in those days when they were 4 hours long. And remember, I was a 7-year-old kid, and it absolutely riveted my attention for those 2 hours. And I realized I hadn't touched my popcorn or my Coke the whole time, and couldn't wait for the intermission to be over. We went into the second half, and again, I hadn't touched my popcorn or my Coke. When it was over, I went out of the theater. There was my mother waiting for me at the curb. I got in the car, and she said, "Well, what did you think?" And I said, "I want to do that." And she said, "What? Go to Arabia?" I said, "No, I want to do what Peter O'Toole did. He took me and the people in that theater to exotic places and to great adventures." And I was set. At 7 years old, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. not many people get to do that.
Mm.
And I was on my course. I really was. But the first time I went to an acting teacher, I was very, very afraid to take risks and chances. In fact, I ended up crying. So I didn't try acting for a long time. But when I was about 12 years old, I went with my mother to pick someone up at a ballet class. And I said, I want to do that because I loved the music and I was a big classical music fan. And what is ballet? It's music in motion.
Mhm.
And so I did that and I got hooked up with two great world famous ballet masters, David Lachine and Tatiana Ryobochinska. And they took me under their wing. For some reason, I was a short, stocky kid. But David in particular really took a shining to me and put me in everything he did. And that's when I lost my inhibitions. Suddenly I was performing on stage in front of audiences and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then I became an actor. Then I was able to act. Went to UCLA. One day I was in the hallway, saw a group of papers that had been thumbtacked into the bulletin board. I never looked at those things, but this day I did. And I went through them and I saw an ad for a summer workshop at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. By the way, yes, I was studying theater arts. And I thought, oh, studying Shakespeare at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. This sounds interesting. And my parents, God love them, I had the best parents in the world. And they said, absolutely, you have to go. And I did. And then I came back and I said, that's where I want my training. And I left UCLA after 3 years because I went to audition in New York. I took that risk. It was the first time I had ever been in New York. I went there alone. I was in heaven. I even loved the trash in the trees. I thought that was great. How creative is that? That's how excited I was about New York. I auditioned with 2,100 other people in New York and, of course, London. And somehow I got in for one of 2,100 places. And I got the training that I wanted and I was on my way. That was it. Now, and here's something that I learned. An interesting side note is in the group that I auditioned with was Carrie Fisher. She did not get in. And her mother, Debbie Reynolds, made a big stink about it in the newspapers in London during my first term at RADA. And I thought, oh gosh, why is she making such a big stink? That's kind of low class. Well, here's the thing that happened. Within a few months after that, she got cast in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Big lesson. Not all losses are a loss.
That's right.
She would have never gotten Star Wars had she been sitting in those classrooms at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. So that was not a bad thing for her. That worked out pretty darn well.
Yeah, it did. The one door that she wanted to have open closed, and it opened up another
And
one
a
that let.
huge door opened up for her. So, not a bad thing.
No, and I remember when she died, and then her mother died. I think it was 24 hours after. I think they died with.
It was very close.
I know that set off shockwaves and grief, I think, throughout the entertainment world. And
Oh, sure.
for anybody that knew them, for any philanthropy work that they did, I remember how tragic and, life altering that was for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. To end this episode in my life, the very first day I was at the Academy. Now, remember, we didn't have the internet in those days. This was 1975. When everybody had left, the day was over, I decided to just walk through the rooms to get a feel of the place. And I went into this one room, and up on the wall, there was this cabinet with two doors that open, and I opened them. And it was the Bancroft Award, which is the highest award that they give to graduating students. And it was a who's who of British theater. And I went down all the names. Most of them I recognized. Albert Finney, Charles Laughton, on and on and on. And I came to this name, Peter O'Toole, who had been my hero and had set me off on this path. And then I realized I was home, and I had no idea that Peter O'Toole had gone to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And it's just funny how things work out.
Yeah, it kind of has that circular quality. At 7 years
Yeah.
old, the first movie you see is Lawrence of Arabia with Peter O'Toole, and then you find
Yeah.
out that Peter O'Toole and you had this shared pedigree,
A shared
at the Royal,
history. Yeah.
shared history at the Royal Academy of Art. So,
Right.
yeah, it's just, the older I get, the smaller my world gets, and when I just hear of all these serendipities and synchronicities, I just smile now.
I had come to where I was supposed to be.
What drew you specifically to London as you look back on this? I mean, what drew you to the Royal Academy that just drove your heart, your soul, and your mind to just say, I want to be there?
It was the discipline of the art that was part of the British theater. It was being able to do Shakespeare, which is very difficult to do in the modern world, being able to do iambic pentameter, being able to understand the language and be able to portray it to an audience, a modern audience, and make them understand it. That's hard to do. For instance, part of the training there, when you get into the advanced terms, in the morning, you're rehearsing one play, which might be a modern play. In the afternoon, you're maybe rehearsing a Chekhov or a George Bernard Shaw. And in the evening, you're performing another play. And that discipline, going through that, is quite remarkable. And it makes you very nimble. And it's based on what is the theater in England, where many of the theater companies do precisely that, performing at night and rehearsing other plays during the day. And it's a wonderful discipline. It makes you very fast on your feet. It's intellectually stimulating. And I loved that. And the British theater stimulated me, the art of it, the language of it. Not to say that American theater doesn't and didn't. And we did American theater there. We did not ignore that. In fact, one of my favorite things I did there was Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, which is one of my absolute favorite plays. In fact, I think that's the Hamlet of American theater, along with Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah.
And Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
I don't discount American theater at all.
I mean, it sounds like the British theater offer you a variety of diverse experiences and an opportunity for you to get versed in a variety of different genres, different styles, different dialects, different
Exactly.
plots.
You got it. And being at the Royal Academy, I got to rub elbows with British royalty. A little bit with the actual royalty, but with the theatrical royalty. And they were opening the new National Theater, and I worked there. I was able to get into work there and got to meet just a wonderful group of people there, see how they work, meet them. Tom Stoppard, the great writer who just recently passed away, I got to meet him, and he was just wonderful to me, very kind to me. He had a play showing there, which I loved. And we had a little backstage, brief friendship where we talked, and he filled me in on a lot of points of professional theater, which I very much appreciated.
How did the British theater compare to American theater? What are some similarities? What are the major differences?
They're not that different. When you get into American professional theater, it's very professional. Again, there's a lot of money on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And unprofessionalism is not tolerated, like it is often in Hollywood. They'll take the unprofessionalism that often happens in Hollywood, which is one of the reasons I didn't like Hollywood at all. For instance, if you go to, say, Broadway, it's kind of a family there. And you don't mess around. One of the things that I learned in theater that translated beautifully into business is you show up.
Yes.
You show up. That's how you get ahead, because a lot of people don't show up.
That's right.
The professionalism of theater is something that I cherished. It didn't always happen in Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, if one person doesn't show up or they show up and they're not carrying their weight, that has an
Right.
impact on the entire cast. And in business, if you have one person on a team who isn't carrying their weight, that impacts the entire team.
Absolutely. And for instance, in Hollywood, you see it. Someone goes to their trailer and locks the door. That's cast, that's crew, that's equipment rental. If I was the producer, if I had money in this thing, I'd be very upset.
Well, yeah. And any other stakeholders that were investing money in it
Yeah.
would be upset too.
Yeah. And
So,
sometimes it happens. And plus, there's a lot of snakes in Hollywood, a lot
right.
of real snakes in Hollywood. I got a role through my manager that I was very excited about. It was to play Aleister Crowley, a historical character. I got it because A, I was British trained. B, with a beard, I was a spitting image of him. And playing, I was playing him as a young man, 10 weeks work in Egypt. And Orson Welles was playing him as an older man. Very exciting. Now, it never happened because only about 1 in 40 projects ever actually make it to being filmed. But my agent at the time, well, let's put it this way. The producer called my manager and said, look, Carl's our guy, no problem. But I just wanted to let you know that his agent was trying to sell me on another person that he could get more money for. So that's the kind of stuff that goes on in Hollywood. I got the job that he would get 10% for, and he's trying to screw me out of it. That's Hollywood. Hooray for Hollywood.
Yeah, integrity doesn't seem to be one of the core values that govern Hollywood
No.
and the entertainment industry in Hollywood.
Yeah. Theater's not like that. That's another thing that I love about theater. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and you don't do that stuff.
I mean, I think it's more intimate. It's
Yeah.
probably you have a smaller cast and crew, and everybody
Yeah.
gets to know each other very well within
That's
the
right.
theater, but outside of the theater.
That's why I left Hollywood. Plus, I didn't like the movies that they were doing back in the 80s, quite frankly. I was not interested. And if you weren't one of the 20 or so stars in Hollywood, you were getting junk films, and I wasn't interested.
Yeah, it sounds like in the British theater, it was all quality. It was all quality stuff that was put out.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Besides showing up, were any other lessons from the theater that you can tell our
Oh,
audience that
yeah.
could correlate to business?
Oh, yeah. I can tell you one at the Academy, this happened actually. We were doing Winter's Tale. And the gentleman who was assigned to direct it, we were, the Academy, all of the rehearsal rooms were full. So we were rehearsing in a pub a block away in an upstairs room in a pub, which is kind of a common thing. And he would sit in the back of the room drinking pint after pint of beer. And we're rehearsing, and we'd finish a scene and we'd look at him and say, well, some direction. And he'd say, oh, no, it's fine. It's great. Next scene. We got no direction from this guy at all. And so we're wondering, are we really that good? And what? And we went on that way, and we were figuring that we had a mess on our hands, but not sure. And we come to opening night, and of course it was a disaster. And this was my first Shakespearean lead in London, an American actor, Shakespearean lead in London. No, I'm not nervous. I'm not nervous at all. But of course, I wanted to jump off a roof, but that was, it was a hot mess. It was a disaster. After the performance, I see him in the Academy bar, and he's about 3 feet away from me at the bar. He takes a long draw on his beer, and he looks over at me and he says, what do you suppose went wrong? And I just wanted to kill him on the spot. But there's a lesson there. There was no leadership, absolutely no leadership. But then you have to ask the question, where were we? We could have taken leadership. We could have rehearsed scenes and have one of us not in the scene direct. We know enough about theater that we could have done some direction. We could have stepped up. We could have taken control, and maybe it wouldn't have been the greatest production in the world, but it would have been a hell of a lot better than what we came up with.
Mhm.
I learned that lesson. You can lead from the bottom.
Yep.
So that was an important lesson. Some of the other things that I learned, I worked with some of the very best in theater. Some of the people that I worked with at the Academy are today some of the very best in British theater and film and television. And what I learned is working with the best is always the greatest way to improve. It's always the best. Working with the best directors, working with the best actors, even when you're not on their level, don't be afraid of that because they're going to pull you up.
Yeah.
When I started working with the Walt Disney Company, I was working with the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a long way to go to get on their level. And they pulled me up. And that was a great experience. When I was working there, I knew that was the best job I would ever have. I was right. That was a wonderful experience. It was the same in theater. It was the same in business, working with the best.
Yeah.
Get yourself there.
You got it. And I always thought Walt Disney was a visionary anyway. He was a man ahead of his time with a lot of the projects he came up with for Disney, even when I was a kid. But, you made a great point about when your supposed leader kind of just goes south or goes down for whatever reason, as a team, we could pick up the slack and do the best we can under the circumstances.
Yeah.
But I had a very wise mentor. He was a Navy SEAL commander and a certified social worker, which was, to me, a heck of a combination, but he knew how to build teams. And one of the things that he said to me, Carl, that always stayed with me, he said, if a person goes on vacation on this team, they should not have to come back catching up, which meant that we took care of each other. But but the other thing that he said to me that always stuck with me, he said, if one person on our team goes down, you don't need my permission to pick up the slack. And he set that norm right from the beginning to say, look, we're going to pull together as a team, and you don't need me to do that. You just need me to set the stage as a norm that this is how we're going to do business. This is how we're going to take care of each other.
That's right. That kind of leads into what we're doing with our coaching business, is how to make teams work better. And I'm sure we'll get on to that later. And when I became a director in theater, that's what it's all about, is you're getting people together who have very different visions, who have a lot at stake, frankly. On that opening night, when the critics are there, they have a lot at stake. And you've got to get them onto your vision. You've got to listen to them and bring them around to your vision, but you've also got to take care of their vision too. And that's teamwork. When you're a leader, it's not just do what I tell you to do. That doesn't work. Nope. You got to bring them on board, but you've also got to give them what they need.
Yeah.
For them to be able to work properly. And you've got to look for opportunities for them, not just opportunities for yourself. And there's always opportunities out there, always. On that score for opportunities, I can tell you about a thing that Franco Zeffirelli was doing a production of Hamlet here in Los Angeles. And boy, I wanted in on that. I wanted in on that in a big way. And Richard Gere was playing Hamlet, which even more so, I wanted in on that. And so I went in on the casting call and I sat down in front of him, which surprised me. That's not usually how it works. And he looked at my resume and then looked up at me And he said, what am I going to do with you? And he called me back. He was auditioning me for Osric. Now, most people have no idea who Osric is in Hamlet. He's the minor character. At first, I was going, Osric. But then I remembered Osric is this character who comes in late in the play. He's this fool. He's this malaprop. He gets his words all mixed up. He's this very funny character if you do it right. Hamlet toys with him and he toys back, and it's very funny. And then he's chosen to narrate the big fight at the end where everybody gets killed. So it's very touch and go. He's got that to handle this, or it becomes, that ending scene can be really kind of stupid if it's not done right. And so I thought, oh, I can have fun with this. I can have fun with this. I can be noticed here. And so I went away and I worked on that scene with Hamlet where he toys with Osric. And I came back ready for bear. And I got the role. And it was just another one of those things where it never happened because Zeffirelli wanted all the sets and costumes done in Italy, and the Amundsen Theater decided that was too expensive and they couldn't agree. And so the show never happened, darn it. But I was so looking forward to that. Can I get noticed with Richard Gere? I really wanted to do that, but oh well. But it shows that preparation and valuing the opportunity that you get can get you somewhere, even if it's a small opportunity.
Yeah, but like I said, it's the effort that you put into that opportunity. You wanted to make sure that you were representing Osric in a way that would befell Osric and would befell the integrity of Hamlet. So
yes, exactly.
And but the attention to detail that you put into what is seemingly a small role is going to set the stage for you getting bigger opportunities. And, a guy like Richard Gere, would hopefully remember that, or in real life, what's going in other situations, what's going to happen is that, hey, this Carl Walsh did a really great job on this particular project in business. I gave him a minor role, but boy, he nailed it. And because of his work ethic rubbed off on everybody else, so we were able to get the mission done and really get the results we wanted from the project, you're going to get recommended for bigger things. And that's something the young adults in this country need to know. Whatever role you get, put your heart and soul into it, because you never know what it's going to lead to.
And that happened to me many times in business, where I was the guy that went out and stayed overnight to monitor what the problem was and discovered what the problem was that nobody else could figure out, because I sat there and just watched it happen overnight. And, oh, okay, he's the guy. And, the other thing about that, particularly for business, if there's a failure, if there's a problem and you or your team caused it, be the first to report it.
Yep.
And report it with the solution.
Yep.
Boy, trust. That creates trust in ways that can't be broken. Well, it can't be broken. It can take a long time to create trust, but that's one of the ways to do it. But I'll tell you, it can be broken in one moment. That's the way, though, that you create major trust, that when you say it's so, they believe it's so.
Yeah, it's about accountability too. Look, it's like I made a mistake, but here's what I learned from it. And I think I got the solution based on the information that I got from the missteps that I took. So
yeah. Here's what we did. Here's where we fell down. Here's how it's not going to happen again. Then your superior can go into the meeting where people are waiting to clobber him, and he's got the answer.
Absolutely. And it models incremental improvements, and it's improving our processes, gradually, incrementally, based on information that we have in that particular moment. So you mentioned, let's go there now, because later is now. You mentioned that there's going to be your business or your business venture, coaching venture is going to be taking some different directions. Tell us about that. I know you're part of the Alpha Dog Group, and as I think you mentioned before, the Alpha Dog Small Business Coaching. Tell us the exciting new directions that are going to be occurring for your businesses, and what your mission is going to be as a result of those new directions.
Well, basically, what we want to do is change the way business does business. Now, there are a few businesses that do it. In fact, my exposure to it was at the Walt Disney Company, at the Disney store when I worked there. We used to, in the IT department, we worked very differently from how most IT departments work. Most IT departments have this plan for some new thing that they're going to do, some new program they're going to roll out to the company. We didn't do that. What we did is we had every 2 weeks, we had a meeting with all the different departments, some representative from each department. And we said, what do you need? And what's the priority? And everybody at that table put in what they need. And then everybody at that table decided what the priority was. So that the number one priority, they all had a voice in what became the number one priority. So nobody got angry when theirs wasn't number one. And some things never rose to the top, but everybody understood why. So everybody was happy with it, and they understood. And that was a powerful thing to do. It really was. And it was one of the ways where, at least at the Disney store, now other areas of the Walt Disney Company did not work that way, and people were not always happy, but it was the way that we worked at the Disney store. And because of it, we had a pretty darn happy company, pretty darn happy corporate headquarters. Because everybody had a say on what we did. You didn't always get what you said you wanted, but you had a say. And because of that, when management made a decision and they said student body left, it was everybody went left. And that was a very powerful way to run a company. Mm-hmm. And we did incredible things in the 5 years that I was there. When I started there were 165 stores, all in the continental United States. And when I walked in, I said, really? 165 stores? Does the world really need any more Disney stores? Well, when I left there were over 600 worldwide. And I said, well, yeah, I guess the world did need a few more stores, didn't they? And we put them there. And it was a joy, those years that I was there. And everybody was so happy. The enthusiasm there was, I used to go in on weekends simply because I wanted to. There was nowhere else I wanted to be. And they would send me to places. They sent me to work in London for 5 months, and it would be what my schedule was: 4 weeks there, 2 weeks here, 4 weeks there, two weeks there, and it was wonderful. They sent me there because they said, Carl speaks the language, send him. Because they had an emergency and Europe needed to be taken care of. So they sent me. And they sent me to New York when we opened our big showcase store on Fifth Avenue, sent me to Caesar's Palace, sent me all over the country to make sure that when a store opened, it opened smoothly. Mm-hmm. There was nothing I'd rather do. I just loved the place. And just to give you an idea of the family feel of the place, when I got married at Disneyland. And sadly, shortly after that, my wife and our child on the way died. Okay, so the funeral service was held in a church about 2 miles away from the corporate office of the Disney store headquarters there. They emptied that building and they came to the service. Just to give you an idea of what the feeling of that place was. They did that. Another way that they kept the family feeling, once a year, they emptied the building, loaded everybody on buses, and went and had a beach party. Now, how much did that cost? How much did that cost for a company of that size? Not much.
No.
And another time, once a year, on a weekend, they took everybody for a big picnic to a ranch and had all kinds of games and food and all sorts of things like that. They gave us a Halloween party after Disneyland closed. They opened Disneyland for us. A Christmas party down at the studio. They did all these things to make everybody feel a part of the company. Did they pay much? No. Did we care? No. And just to give you an idea of how you don't have to pay people a huge salary, we were paid,
Mhm.
but they did other things that didn't cost the company much to do. And all of us would have done anything that they asked us to do and did it happily. And that's a huge lesson for any company to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you create a family-like atmosphere where everybody has an opportunity to be part of the solution, where consensus really brings about the strongest solutions, strongest processes, but but that everybody realizes, hey, we're not going to get what we want, but the fact that our voices and our concerns have been heard, we can live with the outcome. We can live
Yeah.
with not getting everything that we want. And
Yeah.
just how they responded to you in times of your tragedy, and my condolences for the loss of your wife and son.
Well,
It's a parent's worst nightmare, but the lessons I've learned and the teachings I've learned have gotten me to this point in my life and helped me
right.
re-engage with meaning.
But it's the kind of thing where the company constantly showed that they cared about us.
Yes.
So we cared about them.
Yeah.
And we cared about that company.
And that's what's so important. When you are shown that you're being cared for, you're going to reciprocate. And this is human nature.
Yeah.
They put the human into humanistic supervision and humanistic
Yeah.
principles. So
Right. Now, I can't speak for how the company is now. It is a different company. This was back in the 90s, but it was a huge example to me on how a company should work. So what we're doing, Doug Bowers and I, when we put this together in our whole theory of Dogologic, what we've done, and that's our methodology, is Dogologic. Doug created these 7 characters, and he put them as dogs because we didn't want them to be threatening, but they have business personalities. And the 7 different personalities pretty much cover all the different personalities that a business has. And all of them are necessary. Some of them can be really irritating, but they're necessary for any thriving business. And what we believe is that those personalities need to be brought into the decision-making process because they see things differently. It's diversity of thought. And when decisions are made, they need to be there. And we need people who are in the trenches. We need the guy in the warehouse. We need the guy on the loading dock. We need the receptionist who deals with vendors and customers, because that receptionist knows things. The salesperson knows things about the customers and what they need and what they want. And they have information that the decision makers need to know. And very often those people are ignored. They aren't even asked. And they see things differently. So all these different departments and the people who are in the trenches need to be part of the decision-making process. They cannot be ignored. And ignore them at your own peril.
Yeah, and, you mentioned too about even some of the personalities in your Dogologic paradigm are irritating personalities, but you need that. You need individuals to give you
Right.
points that are counter and counterpoints, because if you
Right.
don't have that, I can't see, Carl, where a company is going to be making effective, informed decisions.
The risk averse person, right? The
Mhm.
risk averse person. And you have another person over here who is, hey, let's get it done. Come on. But the risk averse person is asking questions. Yeah, but what about, and are we thinking about this where this could happen? May be very irritating, but that person is keeping you from driving the plane into the ground.
There was something I learned back in my undergraduate college days. Irving Janis from Yale University came up with a paradigm called groupthink. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you've heard of groupthink in terms of how that impacts poor decision making in a company, where
Right.
the norms of any working group are just comfortability, sticking with the status quo, not challenging each other. But in reality, to make informed, complete decisions, we have to challenge each other. We have to
Right.
get each other to think. We have to present counterpoints of views. Leaders can't instill what their own will is on the process. They can't say, well, I really want to see this kind of an outcome, because then the group is going to steer all of its decision-making process into giving the leader what they want. But like you said, you have to have those opposing points of views. If you don't have those, I don't believe effective decision-making can occur.
And innovation doesn't happen.
Yep.
And if you don't have innovation, well, talk to Kodak. They invented digital photography.
Yep.
But didn't think it was worthwhile. Where are they now? They aren't.
Nope.
The only reason that you see Kodak at all is because somebody bought their name. That's it.
I remember that too.
Yeah. There are so many companies that could have been big and aren't. Blockbuster.
Yep.
Netflix wanted Blockbuster to buy them. They didn't think Netflix would work. They thought people want to come in and handle their DVDs. Blockbuster is no more.
Nope.
So innovation, well, of course, everybody brings up Steve Jobs, but he wanted a phone with one button. And everybody said, you can't do that. It's impossible. What? I want it.
And you got it.
Yeah. So innovation, people thinking differently. If you do things the way you always did it, you'll get what you always got, and somebody else is going to be way ahead of you.
And conventional wisdom is always highly overrated. But
Yeah.
another version of that is Einstein doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same results as different
Yeah.
results as the definition of insanity.
Yeah. So and that's the big objection, and what a lot of leaders have objections to creativity.
Yes.
Which is they think they can't control it. It's dangerous. It's expensive. But not going there is more expensive.
Absolutely. Yeah, because companies that don't innovate end up folding up, and that costs a lot of money. Lost money, lost revenue, just closing costs and everything else. And yeah, I mean, innovation to me, if it's done right and everybody has a buy-in to it and that process is truly creative, is going to not only improve morale in a company, but it's going to also improve the bottom line, I would think, exponentially because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there is ways to control it, and you must control it. But there's ways to do it, but you've got to encourage it. You've got to find it. And there are ways to do it. It's just finding the child. People think when they're adults, they aren't creative. And I've been in front of many groups, and you say, how many of you think you're creative? And you get a few hands who tentatively come up. And what I tell them is, no, you think you're not creative. Think back to when you were a child. You were creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you think you've lost your creativity. You think life has beat it out of you. No, it hasn't. You haven't lost your creativity. You've just misplaced it. You can find it again. Mm-hmm. And it's not that hard.
No. And especially if there's an environment that's going to nurture that, it's not going to be hard at all to find it. And it's going to respect that. And it's not going to judge you on what's creative and what isn't. It's just think creatively, think outside of the box.
Yeah. And I can take people, and that's what I do with these groups. I take them through exercises where they can find that creativity. It's there. It's
Yeah.
not that hard.
Well, I mean, one of the creative tools that I think we've used, and I think in non-for-profits and profits, is brainstorming. That's about as creative as it gets, because with brainstorming,
Exactly.
you just throw out the first thing that comes to your mind,
Yeah.
even how ridiculous it may sound, and then you put it all up together on a whiteboard, and you take a look at, geez, what can we pull together? What can we eliminate? What can we put on the
Yeah.
back burner? But you've generated thousands of different solutions just by
Yeah.
allowing primary process to occur.
Right.
Just not think, just come first thing that's in your head.
Yeah. There's a great story. I think they were called Pacific Northwest Power. They're called something else now. This was some years ago, but they had a problem where in spring, rain would come down and then freeze on the power lines. And now their lines are icing up, and now they got a problem. And they would send guys up the power lines to knock it off. Dangerous. And they would have injuries, even some killed. So they were trying to figure out, how can we do this so that we don't put our people in danger? And they brought a whole bunch of people into a room from different departments, and they weren't getting anywhere. So they called a break. And while they were in a break, they were in a break room, and the guy running it heard one of the people talking about a story where he was up a pole, and he looked down and there was a bear starting to climb up the pole. And it was a funny story. So when they came back into the room to start the discussion again, he said, "Hey, why don't you tell us about the bear?" And he told the story, and everybody laughed. And then someone said, "Hey, why don't we get the bear to climb up the pole? Let's put some honey up on top. We'll get the bear to climb up the pole, and he can knock the lines." And everybody laughed, ha, 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 ha. And then someone in the back, I think it was an administrative assistant, said, we could put those pots up there with a helicopter. You don't have to climb up there. We have the helicopters. And then they went, "Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea." And then she said, "Well, no, wait a minute. I used to work in a MASH unit in Vietnam. And I remember when those helicopters came in, there was that thump, 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 and a big burst of wind that came down from those blades. What if we could take those helicopters and run them along the lines, just above the lines, and that big burst of wind could knock the ice off of the lines?" And everybody stopped and went, "Maybe." And they tried it, and it worked. For many years, that's exactly what they did. They used the helicopters to knock the ice off of the lines. This was an administrative assistant, someone who doesn't work on the lines.
Yeah, but she was a part of the organization. Her past experience translated to a creative way to solve that problem.
If you had said an administrative assistant is going to solve your problem out in the field, they probably would have said, "Yeah, okay." But she did. And that's why you bring people in from many different points of view, many different experiences.
Yeah.
And you got to listen to that. And that's our approach, is that you bring the people in, get their ideas. And with critical thinking, it's important to ask the right questions.
Yep.
And dig deeper, deeper, deeper.
Yep. I like it. It's like you're building just a whole community of creative problem solvers from just all walks of life. And I think, yeah, if we could run every business like that in America and the world, I think we'd be great.
Yeah.
So,
and so our oval table, as we call it, with these 7 characters, it's understanding, first of all, what really drives you, and then understanding what really drives them.
Yep.
And being able to talk to them in terms they understand.
Yes.
And everybody understanding each other.
Yep.
So that then you build a respect for each other.
Yep.
And communicating in what we call frictionless communication.
Yep.
So that, I know he's the risk averse guy. Things we respect what he does, and we
Yes.
understand what he does, and we're glad he's here.
Yes. And we don't have to put a label on him either. We can just take a look at what qualities does he bring to the table that are going to help us
Yeah.
achieve the mission.
Right.
So, Carl, this has been a great conversation. You've left us with so much today, and I'm grateful for that. I know my audience is going to be grateful, but I have another question for you. Actually, a couple more questions. My first
Sure.
being, if you're going to leave our audience with one ultimate takeaway, what would that be?
If you really want to have a successful business, you have to make sure you have successful employees. And as I talked about earlier, there's lots of ways to have successful employees. It's not just paying them huge paychecks. You have to give them ownership in some way.
Yep.
Now, I've worked for companies that didn't pay that much, but because they were large corporations, they gave you ownership in stock. Boy, that gives you ownership.
Mm.
I always liked that. I always liked that. In fact, I got to tell you, Disney, for instance, gave me ownership in stock in every paycheck. The house I'm living in right now, Mickey did the down payment. Mickey made the down payment, and it's because of the shares that I got. That was a big deal to me.
I mean, if you make employees part of what you do, you're going to have a well-functioning company, and morale's going to be high, at its highest.
Right.
So, Carl, my last question for you is if
Yeah.
people want to get in touch with you, find out more about what's going on with the Alpha Dog Group and the new directions you're going into, what's the best way for them to do that?
We are just about to launch our company. We have a Gmail set up so that people can get in touch with us. It will change down the line as we get all our trademarks nailed down. But for right now, the best way to reach us is at the Oval Table Team at gmail.com. That is our temporary email. We'd love to hear from you. We will get back to you, and we'd love to talk to you. And we are setting up a test. We will have it operational very, very shortly. You will get the oval table on your screen, all our Dogologic characters, and you get to pick one, and it will tell you how you pick it. And we've had incredible success with this. The accuracy surprises us, frankly. It's about 98% accurate. You pick it, and it tells you what that characteristic is. And people say, wow, yeah, that is me. It's very clever how it's done. We'll have you take that test, and it'll tell you what your characteristics are. And we'll invite you to a free webinar, and we'll get you to understand what we're doing with this whole Dogologic project. We're very excited about it. We want you to participate and know about this because we're very excited about it. So that's Oval Table Team at gmail.com.
Got it. I'll make sure your contact information gets in the episode notes when our podcast goes live on all of my platforms. So with that, Carl, thank you so much for just a great conversation tonight. I wish you well. I wish you a blessed 2026. Happy holiday season, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
The same to you, Dave, and to all our listeners out there. I hope their businesses, and if you're wanting to be an entrepreneur, if you're tired of what you're doing and of your job, entrepreneurship is a great way to go, and we'd love to help you with that journey. And everybody just have a great 2026 and find your journey to success and happiness.
Thank you, Carl. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.